Good evening, everyone. I am pleased to launch another South Central Chapter INPS presentation. And we have two speakers tonight, Natalie Marinova and Bill Daniels. And I'll start with introducing Natalie, who will present first. She is the Assistant Director at Ecologic. She has a Bachelor's of Science degree in agriculture from Prairie College and has worked in native plant landscaping and nursery fields across 4 states, Kentucky, Ohio, North Carolina, and Indiana. She is a leading consultant and salesperson at Ecologic and designs and oversees native landscaping, green infrastructure, and installation projects. From growing to maintaining and managing native plants have been a passion for Natalie for over 20 years. Natalie, please go ahead. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Great. Thank you, Carolyn, for the introduction, and thanks everyone for joining tonight. I get to talk about one of my favorite things to talk about, native plants in general, but also kind of how to grow those from seed. I have a PowerPoint presentation that I'll share, and then I have some hands-on things to go through as well. So there's lots of ways you can propagate plants vegetatively by cuttings and things like that. But again, today we'll focus on seed production. And it's a good introduction to Bill's talk about his initiative that he's launched, which he'll tell everyone more about after my presentation. So just very generally, I'm going to cover a little bit of collecting and storage of plants, go through what kind of necessary treatments seeds need, and then even the whole process of briefly germination and transplanting, because it's one thing to be able to collect seeds, and it's another thing to actually be able to get plants to grow from those seeds, right? And no one's ever going to be able to remember all of this information. So there's a lot of valuable resources out there, and we'll cover some of those at the end of the presentation to wrap things up. So place of origin is very important, and being able to collect seed locally can be a big difference. You can buy seeds from many different places like Prairie Moon Nursery, Spence Restoration, but Asclepias syriaca, common milkweed from New York, could be very different from common milkweed that you might get from Georgia. I did have, when we were Ecologic, had a nursery for a relatively short period of time, and I had common milkweed from 3 different seed sources, I believe from 3 different counties across the state. They germinated at different time. They had slightly different leaf shape. So even genetic diversity, happens from across within a state even. So if you're planting locally, it's helpful to be able to collect seeds and grow seeds from as local as possible. If you are collecting from the wild, you never want to collect more than 10% of a healthy population. You always want to have permission from a landowner if you're not collecting from your own property. And of course, I think for this group, most everyone knows this, but as we branch out to other people that may not be as aware, we never want to collect seed from rare or threatened plants, and we're never going to wild dig plants. Once seeds have been collected, and I'll go over a few tools that I use in the field. Seeds just end up getting stored in a nice, cool, dry place, and you always want to record the date that seeds are collected. I don't think I have a slide for this, but the basic tools that I go out in the field with for my arsenal of collecting seeds is basically a hand pruner, Sharpie, and paper bags. That's really usually all I need. If you're collecting seed just for yourself to grow plants, plants produce a lot of seeds a lot of times. So you don't need very many seeds oftentimes to grow a lot of plants. It'd be a different case if you were trying to collect seed to sell seed in the example of a nursery. But as I was noting, when you collect the seed, I'm usually doing this in a paper bag, and you always want to kind of label what you have. I'm using the first 3 letters of the scientific name. So is this backwards for you all, where you can see it regularly?
We could see it.
Yep. It's backwards in my screen. But this is royal catchfly that I collected last year. So I always put the species name, who collected it, what year, and ultimately I know that these were plants that I bought from Spence Restoration Nursery. So the genetic origin is still from Spence Restoration. So if I had collected this seed in a particular county, for example, on a roadside or person's property that I knew, I would put Monroe County, Indiana, and just note that.
I'm not sure your slides are advancing, Natalie.
Yeah, they weren't meaning to yet.
Oh, okay.
I haven't added a slide for the collecting tools yet.
Okay.
Yep. Once you've collected seeds, cleaning the seeds is the next step. And again, I apologize that I haven't kind of put some of these slides in there yet, but again, there are a lot of very convenient household tools that you can use. I really clean seeds with a different screen types, colanders, even those wire colanders make really great seed cleaning apparatuses. The holes in this colander are pretty big, and they might be ideal for cleaning something like Baptisia seeds. I think those seeds would drop through there. But the general idea, and I have a seed here as an example, is to get your colander, get a solid flat, and take your plant material. These are very dried out at this point. See if there's any leaves left on them that we can kind of tell what this is. Probably, I'm not sure very much, but this is penstemon seed, Penstemon digitalis, so one of our beard tongues. But the idea is just to get the appropriately sized screen, take your seed pods, the seeds, and these are very hard at this point, but you can usually just crack those seed pods, shake things through, and depending upon the size of the seed, either the seed will fall through and the chaff and the leaves and all the extra material will stay behind, or vice versa. So it's just kind of understanding, and we'll talk about this in a minute, about I've crushed up all this stuff. How do I exactly figure out what is the exact seed part here? What part am I trying to go for? So seeds need a lot of different treatments. Many native plants have dormancy mechanisms that need some kind of trigger before they will start germinating. So anytime we're doing even prairie seedings, we've figured out different seed mixes. We know if it's going to do better with a fall seeding or a spring seeding. And just with native seeds, they're just going to lie dormant until the proper conditions occur for them to grow. So if you're trying to grow seeds for yourself, you have to kind of try to mimic nature and figure out what kind of treatment these seeds need. Unfortunately, a lot of people have already done this and figured this out for us. So there are a lot of resources out there that you can use to figure out. Some of the different treatments are like the Coca-Cola treatment, which would imitate an acid system of if there are certain seeds, and these would mostly be shrubs and tree seeds that have to go through like the gut of an animal before they actually break down that seed coat and break down. Hot water treatment could replicate fire. And most of our native seeds that we would be growing ourselves mostly just need a cold, moist stratification period. Some of those need varying times of cold, moist stratification, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And we can replicate that by just the media that I like to use is just usually a sand and perlite mix, or sand and perlite and vermiculite work really well. So I usually just get that mixture nice and moist so that I can squeeze it together, put the seeds in a bag, and then put it in the fridge. You want to put them in a refrigerator, not a freezer. They just need a cold period. So Prairie Moon Nursery is invaluable for figuring out what treatment certain seed species need. They have, I'm not sure how many species now on their list, but probably close to 200, probably around that. So they code seeds, and you can just follow those different codes to kind of figure out what kind of treatment the seeds need. Another resource that I use and has a little bit more, some shrubs and some trees, but also some of the more spring wildflowers is Bill Kalina's book. He's with the New England Wildflower Society. And so he has his own kind of set of germination codes too. So there's our example of, you know, again, I just use a bucket, and it's usually 1 part sand to 1 part perlite. I find that the sand works better than vermiculite, though I know some people have used the vermiculite too. And again, that's just a good example there in the picture. You just want to squeeze it or have enough moisture in it, so when you hold it together, when you squeeze it, it stays held together. Record keeping is invaluable. Be sure that you have the correct ID and the source. And this is not noted in the picture here, but you want to put a date on it, or usually when I was running the nursery, I would have multiple species. So they would just all go in a bag together. So I would say, oh, December 15th, these went in the fridge. So if they need 30 days of cold, I know that they would come out January 15th. So kind of just being sure you have your same kind of seeds together is helpful. Now this gets into a little bit. Be sure you can ID your seeds. And again, Prairie Moon is invaluable for this as a resource as we get into a few slides here. Sometimes when we're collecting in the wild, these top 2 seeds here, we were trying to get a woodland sunflower. And these were collected, came back, and we were trying to clean them. And these other seeds popped up in there. Does anybody recognize or know what seeds these are? Wing I know stem. Everybody's muted. Wing stem?
Wing stem.
Yep, yeah. So while wing stem's a great plant, as far as in the nursery anyway, it was the sunflower that I was trying to grow. So you could understand if you were sowing all of these seeds in a flat to grow, that you would want to be able to have these separated out so that they aren't all mixed together. And the example on the right there are 2 different wild senna seeds. And Prairie Moon here does a really great job of showing pictures of seeds and putting things in scale so that you can see the scale of the seeds as well. So we have the Senna hebicarpa, the wild senna, and Senna marilandica as well. Excuse me. So again, just 2 different species that you would want to know. Then once these seeds start coming up, how do I know what my seedlings look like? So I've trying to recall if Prairie Moon has very many seedling pictures, but these are 2 great seedling guides that have some pretty common species that you would get in prairie plantings most of the time. But these 2 books, these 2 resources have some really great pictures of seed to seedling immature plants. Has anybody been out collecting seed this season so far? Maybe a few people have. You know, our spring wildflowers are some of the harder to grow from seed plants. So I haven't really propagated many of our spring wildflowers from seed, but I did catch. So some of the few that I've collected already, I did manage to catch the wild geraniums this year, finally, because I will sit and watch these seed pods, and then I take my eye off of them for one day, and the seeds have sprung. So I watch those green pods, and one trick that you can do is, you know, because timing can be somewhat crucial, is you know, understanding when something flowers and to know that flowering period. And if you aren't going to be able to wait until the seed matures, either because you can't get back to that site again, or more likely the case is wildlife or wind or other elements will take that seed away before you can get to it. I do harvest a lot of plants kind of before the seeds have matured. So in the case of the penstemon, the beard tongue, these are all really dried up, but this is a pretty long stem and the seed pods are way up here. So I cut a lot of plant material off. You know, I've got about 10 inches of plant material here. So I find that if I cut off a bunch of green plant material and put them just into a paper bag like this and leave them upright, that there's usually enough material or juice, you know, enough life in that stem of the plant still to allow those seeds to still mature and become fully ripe. So
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
How do you
Yes.
know, how do you even know when it's okay to, do you wait till the flowers are all gone? On the, let's say the penstemon.
Yep, you usually have to wait till all the flowers have gone, and then the fruiting body will usually develop. So whatever that is, if it's a capsule or an achene, and just understanding the different, you know, the flower petals and everything have usually fallen off, and usually you're just kind of left behind with a pod of some kind, and if that's, usually it turns to a tan or a brown to indicate that it's ripe and that seed has matured. You know?
That's what I need to know, brown or tan.
Yeah, that's usually for most things. Then I was starting to talk about the wild geraniums. So these were all pretty green when I harvested these as well. I tried to take some pictures of these beforehand too, but I've ended up with a pretty big conglomeration of them. But I harvested these green and put them into this cup, and a lot of the seed has just ripened and fallen off. So you can see how dark brown through the cup there that these seeds are. So yeah, it's kind of hard to, need like a little micro lens on this. But these little seeds normally just shoot right off of the plant. And this was kind of the first year that I was actually able to collect some wild geranium. So that was exciting. Trying to break off one of these so that you can really see. They're kind of like similar to a touch-me-not, in that if you touch them when they're really ripe, they just fall right off. But they are just really beautiful too. These things were all the way down. It was one long slender capsule, and as those seeds ripen, the pod just kind of opens and projectiles the seeds out of there. So if you're just getting into trying to grow some seed, these are some easy species to start with. A lot of our asters are fairly easy to collect if you can deal with the fluff okay, and they grow pretty readily from seed as well. A lot of our Eupatoriums, which are Joe Pye weed, Monarda, the purple coneflower Echinacea, you know, has a pretty dense seed head on it that allows for pretty easy seed collection and high germination rate on those. Some of our Rudbeckias are the black-eyed Susans, Lobelias, and our milkweeds grow pretty easily from seed as well. Does anybody have any questions about collecting seed or anything before moving on just a little bit to the next parts?
Is there any reference source, Natalie, that has a listing for our area in terms of when seeds are ripe?
That's a good question. I don't know of one, and I'm not sure if with Bill's initiative, if your information, Bill, will have anything like that.
Yeah, actually, that's one of our projects.
Yep.
I was going to mention that we've been doing some research on that, and I'll touch base on it in my presentation.
Good.
Great question.
Awesome. So people can sow seeds a lot of different ways. And I'm kind of speaking at this a little bit from nursery production because that's my background. But somebody could do this in a home setting. And I've, even before, even at Ecologic, before we had our greenhouse, we were utilizing just the bay windows in the garage. And, you know, it's not ideal. You're kind of rotating things around a lot, so you don't get too many leaning plants. But, you know, just having a nice south-facing window, a windowsill to be able to grow things. And you don't need a whole flat earth to grow things, even just having like little pint-sized containers where you could keep different species per pint would allow you to sow seed in a number of different, in a pretty small space, and still be able to grow things. Some of the things to remember still about after you've sown the seeds, if you've looked through those germination rates or the stratification codes, sometimes it'll say seeds need to be surface sown. So that means they can't be covered up at all. You know, a lot of our native seeds are just teeny tiny and just really need to be barely below the surface. I still just kind of follow the rule of going back to vegetable gardening a little bit, and you know, 3 times the depth of the seed, you know, which still isn't very deep for very many things. And you think about in nature, most of these seeds are just falling onto the ground, and then they're relying on freeze thaw patterns to kind of draw them into the soil a little bit. But if you're trying to force things, seeds will really start to grow when they've kind of been maintained at around 70 degrees, I think, is what starts to get seeds germinating. Sometimes if seeds are large enough, again, as I mentioned, covering the seeds up 2 to 3 times their depth. But if the seeds are large enough, like Silphium species, a lot of our prairie docks and cup plants, if you're so inclined to grow more cup plant, those seeds that are large enough, I actually like to just even hold those and stick them in. I would do that a lot with the Liatris, so the blazing star species as well. Just kind of pluck those down in little rows and point them downward. Germination's the exciting part. I really need to get a picture of a native plant here and not the ubiquitous little bean plant, but you know, understanding germination is, you know, you've got the emergence of the epicotyl, and you've got your first shoot where your cotyledons develop. The cotyledons are the first 2 leaves that come out. And that's kind of been the food source for the embryo, for the little developing seed there. So the first 2 leaves that come out are the cotyledons, and then you get the emergence of the first true leaves. So here's an example, yep, of the epicotyl is the first little root that comes out. And then these are your cotyledons. And it's kind of hard to tell, but this is the first true leaves that are starting to come out there. So yeah. Let me see if one more slide goes on. Nope. I'll cover that in just a second, but some of the things that do affect germination are light, temperature, and water. I've always been growing native plants, and I still just go with the natural day cycles. I've never tried to grow native plants under any other artificial lights other than, and if I did have to grow them with lights, I would just try to mimic the same daylight that would be outside. And again, most seeds need around 70 degrees to germinate, and then fluctuating from day and night cycles of 40 degrees to 70. So even when we were growing things in the greenhouse, we kind of just kept, I didn't heat the greenhouse a ton, but we did keep it above freezing, but mostly we were trying to grow things in January and February so that we could have plants ready for everyone that wants to buy them in May. You know, you don't have to necessarily provide those extra temperatures if you're just growing them for yourselves. Water is a good thing to understand once you've had these seeds germinated. You know, some drying between watering is good. You don't want to keep things consistently wet. That could lead to rot, with the exception of some wetland plants. Again, I just always try to think about how is this seed processed in nature. So it's a wetland plant. If it's a really wet plant, I would tend to keep it pretty moist and wet. Lots of different mediums that you can use for growing seed. You know, there's just the sterile seed mixes are the best to use. It's what I've had the most luck with. And again, I'm just kind of talking from a nursery background. So using a well-drained medium so that you don't have too much moisture. Yeah, and there's a couple notes there that you could add more compost for wetland species or add perlite or sand for more well-drained species. So that'll just help things dry out a little bit more. I thought I had this in here. So with transplanting, this is, you want to transplant from your seedling flat to little individual pots to give to your neighbors, so to convince them that they need to have natives in their yard as well. You don't get to hog all the fun. It's important to share these plants with everybody else. So you do want to wait until you get the first true leaves to emerge. And you always want to handle the plants by the leaves themselves. You want to try to really avoid holding the stem and damaging any of that stem. Once they've been transplanted and are in little pots, just being sure to keep them at a nice consistent moisture, keeping them well lit. And going through this a little quickly, but if you really want to get into in depth in a lot of this stuff, there's some pretty in-depth guides there, seed germination theory and practice. And I can provide this presentation to people if they want it afterwards. There's those pretty in-depth things, but they're a lot over my head. And so really all you need to get started is Prairie Moon Nursery and again, the New England Wildflower Society are just the two really great resources. Prairie Moon just goes over so much. I really appreciate how they, they give you a basic description of the map, of the plant range map, so you can understand if this is, hopefully if you're collecting on your own, if you're in a natural area, it's native to that area. But range maps can be pretty important to help you understand where that plant is native to. Planting guides. And over here, you can see the germination code. So this means C30. This needs to be cold stratified for 30 days at least. And as mentioned before, Bill Kalina's Wildflowers and his Trees, Shrubs, and Vines book gets into a little bit more harder to grow things. And that's just kind of a little bit more detail on some of the sections that Bill Kalina's books go into. And I'm kind of trying to save a little bit of time for some questions or just to talk about stuff if people need to. I know we could answer a few questions and then I think let Bill do his presentation and have more time for questions if needed.
I have a question.
Mhm.
This is sort of making an assumption that after the stratification, everything is being potted and then it's inside. It sounds like, and I mean, you know, Miriam, we often went out there and did this in December, and she made her little pots and her little signs, and we put them all into the ground. There was no stratification process first, assuming that these
Correct.
were going to do it naturally. And she had a pretty good
Yeah.
germination rate. So is that something else that's suggested?
It is. I was going to cover that at the end too, to just say that for homeowners and people just trying to do this on their own, that's really the easiest and the best way to do it.
Okay.
Yep. You know, you can collect your seed, and that just gives you a really good way to be able to collect your seed, have it in kind of a contained, controlled space, so that you can actually see what germinates, and then you're able to either transplant those into individual pots so that you can grow and develop a well-rooted plant before putting it into the ground somewhere. But no, that's a perfectly acceptable and really great way to grow things. And yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and introduce Bill. He's the vice president of our chapter. He retired in 2019 after work life spent in horticulture and environmental health and safety. And as a master gardener and INPS South Central Chapter Vice President, he now spends much of his time propagating native plants from seed and communicating how fulfilling growing your own natives can be. He lives in Nashville, Indiana, and is involved in other areas of interest, including vocal music and the effects of our food choices on biodiversity loss. Very interesting. Thank you, Bill.
Our challenge is great. And in fact, this is really more of I would say a tragedy. I don't know how many of you saw this from the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew last year, but 40% of the world's plants are at risk of extinction. And and the terrible thing about this, even more terrible, is the fact that the last report that they did was in 2016, and it was only 20%. So things are rapidly progressing. And of course, if we are doing that to the base, our ecosystems, the base of the ecosystems being our plants, then our animals are going to suffer. And I know many of you have seen these terrible headlines over the past few years. And eventually it's going to really be, we're going to suffer too, because we're reliant on nature as well. So I retired, as Carolyn mentioned, a couple of years ago, and I love native plants. I've been, ever since I read the book, The American Woodland Garden by, Rick Dark. I think I did that about 10 years ago. And then that led me to Doug Tallamy. And I was just amazed by what natives do for us. And so I really started studying that and planting. We've got 3.5 acres here in Brown County and planting a lot of natives here. And at the same time, well, I shouldn't say the same time because I traveled so much, but I really started propagating just a couple of years ago of the natives. I had done a lot of that previously from 14 to 31 before I went into the field of environmental health, but I really got into it. And I also at that time was doing the Purdue Extension Master Gardener. And so I wanted a project. And so I decided to do something on native seeds. You know, we saw about the extinctions, but we're also, even our common species are seeing severe declines. And some of you, like you, Paul, and Natalie, and Jillian, you've, I would imagine in your careers of working with plants, you've seen you see this quite readily. We've also got a lot of cultivars that are being sold in our retail trade. In fact, I went to May's Greenhouse here in Bloomington, and there are very few straight species there. Natalie talked about provenance is an important thing. They may be, these cultivars are typically from another area. They're pretty, they may be well behaved. They do have some ecological support, but they lack genetic diversity. Another need that I saw was related to this. Of course, local provenance, native seeds, native plants and seeds is extremely limited, as I mentioned. And also personal knowledge regarding how to collect and grow native seeds is limited. And then finally, Carolyn sent out a survey earlier this year. And one of the top program, at least subject, was seed collection and propagation. So we decided to really focus on native seed as a master gardener project, as I mentioned, and I got input from well over 20 people over the past year, from representing a lot of different organizations, and eventually the Indiana Native Plant Society picked it up as part of the Landscaping with Natives initiative. And I've been working with Coralie Palmer there, Wendy Ford, and others that have really been helping to hone in this project. So who we are, okay? Indiana Native Seed Communities is a network of native plant enthusiasts that are interested in learning about, advocating, and growing native plants from seed. So that's really the focus there. And then when we think about an individual community within this network, the intention going forward is that it'll be a group of individuals within the society's chapters region. So we're actually, this is the rollout of this initiative, and we're doing a pilot here in South Central Indiana. As far as the mission and vision, I'll read these quickly. Kind of goes with what I've already said, but by increasing available programs, resources, and support, we aim to create communities of knowledgeable volunteers and professional growers and inspire them to responsibly collect, prepare, and propagate native seeds of local provenance. And we envision these communities actively participating in expanding Indiana provenance native plant populations in all landscape settings to help create and restore habitat, support biodiversity, and mitigate the impacts of climate change. So the key objective here, because the need is great, is to expand access to seed-grown Indiana native plants. Seed-grown plants that have wide genetic diversity, but also ones that are from our region, and especially within ecoregions. And for those that have looked into that, we're focusing more on the level 3 ecoregion, and we've got 5 of those in Indiana. But anyway, and to be able to do this, how we're going to do this, demystify growing native plants from seed. Hopefully, then we'll encourage more people to sow Indiana native seeds. And you don't have to be a master gardener to grow native plants from seed. In fact, I find them a lot easier than doing our garden with our tropicals and our edibles. So anyway, it's very easy, and we're working very hard at being able to do that. I developed groups of trained volunteers working together to collect and prepare Indiana provenance native seeds and plants. Support a couple of projects, the Project Wingspan, a pollinator partnership, as well as the newly formed Indiana Plant Conservation Alliance's Growers and Gardens Committee. And the project really is set up to focus on those common plants, those ones that are horticulturally adaptable, to be able to get the genetics, the local genetics. Now, of course, the Plant Conservation Alliance, and as Natalie said, when we're dealing with rare or threatened plants, that's really where they're working, but they are going to need volunteers to help develop that that whole initiative as well. So anyway, the intention is the training people get, they'll be able to contribute if they would choose to be part of the volunteer corps of that of the Alliance. Facilitate members collected seed and seed grown plants to be shared with friends, sold for fundraisers, or donated to public gardens, preservation projects, etc. So we're looking at being able to do this throughout the state of Indiana, but to be able to really focus in on those regional seeds. Assist growers by making available responsibly sourced wild collected native seed. So we love our growers, and we'd like for more of them to be sowing straight species, and especially from of a local provenance. So we do have a couple of projects we're working on right now in collaboration with the Plant Conservation Alliance. We're benchmarking similar organizations. We're looking at Georgia. We're looking at the Native Plant Trust or the New England Wildflower Society. They're the new name they have now, and they have a new name, and a few other organizations to help us not only develop our native seed project here, but the Conservation Alliance as well. One of the things we're also working with these other organizations is a tracking system to be able to track our target species, properties where healthy populations exist, and those that we have the permission to be able to collect seed from, seed collected, seed germination, and propagation. So we're right now kind of laying out what we're interested in and talking to some other organizations that do this well. One of those is the Pollinator Partnership. They've got a really terrific software, and if anybody on the call have any ideas, has any ideas on this, please give me a yell. Chris, I think you were the one that asked about a seasonal schedule, and we're talking about that on our Facebook group. I've done quite a bit of research here. We thought we had heard that Bill Kalina had at one time put something together for the New England area. I did talk to a couple of folks that were also propagators at Garden in the Woods, where Bill Kalina was, and one came before Bill Kalina and the other after. They said they had a calendar there, but they didn't really have it published. So anyway, we're developing our own, and we're able to look at some of the work with the tall prairie. Natalie, you may know the name of it, or Paul, or somebody else, but anyway, I think it's out of Tall Prairie Institute, maybe out of Iowa, maybe it's out of Wisconsin, but anyway, it doesn't matter. We've got some templates that we're working with, and hopefully over the next few years, as we gather phenology data, we'll be able to have a good seasonal schedule. And then in collaboration with Pollinator Partnership, we're most likely going to use their seed collection training. And I've been talking to Nicole Messakar, who is the state representative. And some of you probably know Nicole. And if you are interested in helping out with Pollinator Partnership, do give me a yell. I'm going to be helping quite a bit in Southern Indiana with that. And it fits really nicely with this project. All right, so let me look at my time. Well, I think we're doing okay here. I wanted to share with you a few of the resources that we have put together. And one of those we put up online on the INPS website. And tell me, are you able to get there? Or can you see this? Did it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, terrific. So, so Natalie and I forget who asked, but anyway, one of you asked about just doing it through the winter time and let nature do its thing. This is one of my propagation beds. I think this is March actually, and just a propagation box that I have, and I put hardware cloth under it and on top of it. But that's the banner. But we've put in here quite a few resources that you can link to, where to get seeds, collecting your own, native seed companies, sowing your native seed, stratification methods, and so forth. We, of course, if you're ordering from Prairie Moon, although you can ask them for the provenance of the seed, chances are they may not be from, let's say, Bloomington, Indiana, or Monroe County, or even this eco region. But nevertheless, we're not against growing such seeds. It's if we can get the wild seed, that would be great from our area. And then over here, I wanted to show you a lot of propagation resources that some of these actually, Natalie covered. And I believe I've got Natalie in here someplace, a presentation she did earlier. It's down here. So she does a more full hour-long presentation here. And then other names you may recognize. So a lot of great information here if you're interested in growing your own. Now, as far as native seed communities itself, we have put in a lot of materials or information on this, as well on the INPS website, pilot project, and who we are, expanding access. Some of this you've already seen. We do have questions, frequently asked questions over here. And there's a beautiful photo by Paul Rothrock. And so anyway, so we've got a lot of materials here. If you would like to know more about a native seed, you can find it right there.
super.
And then, and if you want to join in on the discussions, get involved, we just started this, I think about a week and a half ago, but we've got a Facebook group. And another beautiful picture by Paul. Thank you, Paul, for your contributions. And then, so we've got a Facebook group too. So right now, I think we've got about, well, nearly 80 members. So anyway, you're welcome to join. Please do join us, in fact. Okay, let me get back to my presentation. And then finally, if, whoops. Yeah, and if, really, I'm talking, I think, primarily to South Central Indiana. If you want to be more involved, I am pulling together I'm putting together a list of those that want to be actively involved within our chapter. So please contact me. You can contact me at seed@indiananativeplants.org. And one final thing, I think, let me look at the time. I just wanted to show you, I did have the process that we use, but I did want to show you, and I won't go through all of this, but this is the stratification box in the wintertime. Let nature do its thing. And then you can see a little bit the process. So you can do this at home. It's very easy. Okay, that's what I had today.
Adam, you've got your hand raised.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much, Bill.
Sure.
This is really exciting. I had a question about the interaction between cultivars and species in our yards. So for instance, just to take one sort of example, we've got species coneflowers, we've got coneflowers we've bought at nurseries, various cultivars over the years. They seem to be hybridizing and resowing in the yard. Do you recommend that we really try to figure out which ones are closest to the species and gather those? Or should we just say, great, the plants are doing their thing in our yard and that's wonderful and be happy about it? Like, how do you think about this issue when you're looking at the seed collection, looking at collecting seeds?
Well, others may have ideas there. Natalie, and Paul and others, but I think if you've already got them in on your landscape and they're already doing their thing, that's great. I know there are some protocols that do say if you are collecting wild native seeds of local genotypes, that you want to make sure you're a good quarter of a mile plus from any cultivars, ones that the ones that have been planted. So I think for like my property, I've got them. I have bought a lot from Ecologic. So I think Natalie, some of yours were local, but I've also got them. I've grown them for a few years from a lot of different places, and I've bought them, and I've got cultivars. So it would be difficult for me to get a local genetic variety from my property. Now I am growing them, and the dream within this project is to work with growers, and we're definitely doing that with the Indiana Plant Conservation Alliance. But the dream is even for these common species to find growers that would be willing to do this. And I've talked to a few growers that are willing to grow them and have use the plants for pollinator strips, and then also to be able to collect the seed. So but feel free, some of you others that are much more experienced at it, add to that.
I can add about the coneflowers.
Thanks, Paul.
The native species of coneflowers, they're all rare in Indiana. And so the big concern would be to not contaminate any of those rare populations.
That's right.
The ones that are in your yard, fine, as Bill was saying, but the big concern is, are we doing anything that would damage some of our native populations? So for me, it's a concern further to the Midwest for that group, the coneflowers, because that's where they are more prevalent, and that's where a lot of the breeding stock is coming from.
Yeah, I always use purple coneflower as an example when I'm doing a kind of introductory presentation to gardening with native plants, essentially, and helping people figure out what native plants are, and kind of using the range map of purple coneflower since it's kind of the most common landscape plant that people use. And it's really native to like very few counties within Indiana. So I'm always putting that range map up and having people guess, can you tell what native plant would have this range? So yeah, I think you gave a good answer, Bill, and it's always just trying to, it's imperative to protect the native populations of some of these species.
Right.
Great, thank you so much for those answers. I really appreciate it.
Bad, Adam.
I know when we were doing the new meadow at Brown County State Park, Mike Kaboya insisted that we do not plant blazing star, the prairie blazing star. There is a native population of northern blazing star in the park, and they do hybridize. And so he insisted they do not plant the prairie that's commonly found in people's gardens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to add to a little bit when people are really concerned with putting plants in natural areas where you have kind of larger native ecosystems of certain plant populations around, that people are going to be a lot more particular about what kind of seed mixes they may put out when establishing prairies and meadows.
Might comment in that vein that Nature Conservancy's effort in the northwestern part of the state, the Kankakee Sands, that was so large that they had to raise many, many thousands of seedlings on their own. And all of the seeds were being gathered from Newton County, which is where they're located, and as far north as Lake County, which is just the next one to the north. But that was the limit of their geography for gathering the seeds for that project.
Yeah, Alyssa Nyberg has, who is the propagator there, she has really been a big help with the project as well.
Dorothy, you have your hand raised.
I guess I was trying to see, is there ultimately going to be an effort to, I had the word 1 minute ago and it just left my brain. Well, to have a repository or a place where then people can get seeds from this organization, or will it be directing people to different places always? And I was just thinking of our seed exchanges at our annual conference. Right. Are we going to get more specific about those exchanges? Or is that okay? Like next year, will I be able to say, hey, Bill, I want some native coneflower?
Yeah, we may not have that next year, and we may not have coneflower because it is pretty rare. But I actually had a meeting last week with Cindy. Is it Monnier? Monnier? I've only seen it written. Paul, maybe you know Cindy? I
think Monet. Yeah, I think you're right in pronunciation.
Okay, well, she and I think Paul, you've led this and helped with it in the past, the annual event, but I believe she's in charge of it right now, and so we've been talking about that exact topic, and so we're the intention, yes, is that there will be opportunities within the communities to be able to share those regional seed, and you know, someday, as far as a repository, maybe not if you're thinking of a seed bank, that's a possibility, but right now that's a ways down the road. Right now, it's just being able to facilitate the exchanges, and whether it's through the Facebook group or it's through our email listing, we're still working through that, but that is the intention.
Okay, good. All right.
Great.
Any other questions or closing comments? With that,
I just want to commend Bill. He's done a really great job putting together a lot of resources to make it really accessible for people. So I haven't gotten to delve into it myself, and I know I've helped answer a couple questions here and there, but just seeing the presentation of it today, it's impressive what you've been able to put together, and it's great to have that kind of, you know, at people's fingertips, essentially. You know, there's kind of a lot of resources out there, and it can be really overwhelming. So it's nice to kind of see it gathered all in one place.
Well, thank you, Natalie. Well, thank you for all the help with it.